I was 8 months pregnant when my millionaire husband Ryan abandoned me at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. 1 minute, I was asking him to pull over because I felt sick, and the next, I was watching his luxury car disappear down the highway with my phone, wallet, and dignity inside. The cold night air stung my face as reality set in. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a baby due in weeks. The gas station was closing. The lone attendant, Max, looked at me with suspicious eyes that softened when he saw my pregnant belly. I never imagined a stranger's reluctant kindness would become my lifeline, while my husband was probably speeding home to Vanessa, the woman whose texts I'd spotted on his dashboard display, right before he left me behind like unwanted baggage. That night began my journey from dependent trophy wife to something I never thought possible, a woman who would build her own empire from scratch. My baby clothes business started as a survival mechanism in a women's shelter. Now it's systematically destroying the company Ryan spent a decade building, one contract at a time. This is not just a story about revenge, though watching Ryan's world crumble certainly brings satisfaction. It's about discovering that when someone cruelly cuts you loose, sometimes they're actually setting you free. My millionaire husband abandoned me at my most vulnerable moment, but he had no idea the strength he left behind. Buckle up, get ready, and subscribe for a special surprise tomorrow. Claire's feet ached in her designer heels as she stood beside Ryan at yet another business dinner. 8 months pregnant, she'd mastered the art of looking comfortable while feeling anything but. Her smile remained fixed as she nodded along to discussions about market shares and quarterly projections. She was playing her part, the perfect supportive wife of millionaire tech entrepreneur Ryan Mitchell. "You're glowing tonight," whispered Garrett, one of Ryan's investors, as he kissed her cheek goodbye. "Ryan's a lucky man." Claire thanked him politely, though she'd heard the same hollow compliment from 3 different men that evening. To them, she was an accessory, pregnant and radiant, the living embodiment of Ryan's success. A beautiful wife carrying his heir, the completion of his perfect life tableau. The blast of winter air as they exited the restaurant was a relief after hours of stuffy conversation. Ryan handed the valet a tip without looking at him and guided Claire to their waiting Tesla. "That went well," Claire offered, as they pulled away, trying to gauge her husband's mood. He grunted non-committally, eyes on the road. The car's interior lights illuminated his sharp profile, handsome in that conventional way that photographs well on business magazines. Lately, she'd been noticing how little she saw of his face. He was always looking at screens, at colleagues, at anything but her. Ryan's phone pinged with an incoming message. The car's dashboard display automatically showed the notification, "Vanessa, can't wait to see you tomorrow," confirming 11 a.m. at the usual place. Claire felt her heart rate quicken. Vanessa. The name had appeared with increasing frequency over the past few weeks. When she'd asked about her, Ryan had dismissed her as a new project manager. "Is that Vanessa from the Singapore expansion?" Claire asked carefully, maintaining her pleasant tone while searching his face for tells. Ryan's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "Why are you monitoring my messages?" "I'm not." It appeared on the display. She gestured toward the dashboard. "Well, stop reading my private communications," he snapped, jabbing at the screen to dismiss the notification. "I wasn't trying to. Just drop it, Claire. I've had a long day." The highway stretched dark and empty before them. They were taking the scenic road home, at least 40 minutes from their beachfront mansion. Claire rested a hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby shift. The tension in the car was palpable, made worse by Ryan's constant phone checking. Every few minutes, his eyes darted to the device sitting in the center console. 20 minutes into the silent drive, Claire felt a wave of nausea rise suddenly. The baby pressed against her organs, and the motion of the car amplified her discomfort. "Ryan, could we pull over?" "I'm not feeling well," he sighed audibly. "We're in the middle of nowhere. Can't you wait until we get home?" "There's a gas station up ahead." Claire pointed to a sign indicating services at the next exit. "I just need a bathroom. Please." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he flicked on his turn signal and exited the highway. The gas station was a sad, fluorescent-lit outpost, a single building with a small convenience store attached. Only one other car was parked at the pumps. "Make it quick," Ryan said, as he pulled up near the entrance. "We're already late." Late? For what? Claire wondered, but she was too focused on reaching the bathroom to ask. She grabbed her coat from the back seat as another wave of nausea hit her. "I'll be right back," she said, but Ryan had already returned to his phone, typing rapidly. The bathroom was basic but clean enough. Claire splashed cold water on her face, willing the nausea to pass. Through the thin walls, she could hear the attendant's radio playing country music. She took a moment to breathe, one hand supporting her lower back, the other resting on her belly. The baby kicked as if in solidarity. When she felt steady enough, Claire dried her hands and face with a paper towel and stepped back into the small store. The teenage attendant barely looked up from his magazine. Claire walked toward the exit, looking for Ryan's Tesla in the same spot where he'd dropped her off. It wasn't there. Thinking he might have moved to the parking area, Claire stepped outside, scanning the entire gas station. The Tesla was nowhere to be seen. The only vehicle was an old pickup truck parked by the air pump. "No," she whispered, hurrying back inside. "Excuse me," she called to the attendant. "Did you see where the car went? The black Tesla that was out front?" The boy looked up, blinking slowly. "The fancy car?" "Yeah, guy peeled out of here about 5 minutes ago. Headed back toward the highway." Claire's legs nearly gave out beneath her. She grabbed the counter for support. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, pretty sure. People don't drive cars like that around here." Claire fumbled for her phone before remembering it was in her purse. In the car. With Ryan. "He left me," Claire said, the words hollow in her throat. "My husband just drove away and left me here." The attendant looked up properly now, taking in Claire's expensive dress visible beneath her open coat, her 8-month pregnant belly, and her increasingly panicked expression. "You sure it's not some kind of joke?" he asked, setting down his magazine. "Maybe he's just getting gas somewhere else?" Claire shook her head. "He has a full tank, and it's not a joke." She felt dizzy suddenly, reaching for a nearby shelf to steady herself. "I need to use your phone. Please." The attendant, whose name tag read Max, hesitated before pushing an ancient landline across the counter. "Local calls only." Claire stared at the phone, the reality of her situation sinking in. Without her mobile, she didn't know Ryan's number by heart. Like most people in the digital age, she relied on saved contacts. She tried to remember the first digits, but drew a blank. "I don't know his number," she admitted, shame washing over her. "Do you have a phone book?" Max snorted. "From what century?" Claire closed her eyes, trying to focus. She knew one number by heart, their home landline. Ryan never answered it, preferring his mobile, but it was worth trying. She dialed with trembling fingers, listening to it ring 6 times before the answering machine picked up. The sound of Ryan's recorded voice almost made her knees buckle. "Ryan," she said after the beep, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I don't know if this is some kind of sick joke, but you left me at the gas station off Highway 16. I have no phone, no money, nothing. I'm 8 months pregnant with your child." She paused, then added with sudden clarity, "And I know about Vanessa. Whatever you think you're doing, you need to come back for me. Now." She hung up, her brief surge of anger giving way to raw fear. What if he didn't come back? "Store closes in 15 minutes, Max said, eyes flickering to the clock. "Owners, strict about it." Claire looked out the windows at the darkness beyond. "Where's the nearest town?" "Pineville's about 7 miles east. Nothing but farms before that." 7 miles. Impossible to walk in her condition, especially at night on rural roads with no sidewalks. The panic she'd been suppressing threatened to overwhelm her. "Is there a taxi service? A bus? Anything?" Max shook his head. "Not that runs this late. There's a motel about 3 miles up the road, but..." He trailed off, looking at her heels and pregnant belly. Claire rummaged through her coat pockets, hoping for forgotten cash. She found only a folded sonogram picture and a small bottle of prenatal vitamins she'd tucked away after her doctor's appointment earlier that week. No wallet, no cash, no ID. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered, more to herself than to Max. Max checked his watch again, visibly uncomfortable. He began the closing procedures, counting the register, wiping down the coffee station. Claire stood frozen by the counter, unsure what to do next. "You tried calling anyone else?" Max asked finally, not meeting her eyes. Claire shook her head. "My phone's in my purse, in the car, with my husband." The words sounded absurd even to her own ears. Max sighed heavily, his breath fogging in the increasingly cold store as the heating system shut down for the night. "Look, I can't leave you here. My sister would kill me." He reached for a set of keys hanging behind the counter. "I can drive you to the Pinewood Motel. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean. You can figure things out in the morning." Relief washed over Claire. "Thank you. I promise I'll find a way to repay you." Max shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the gratitude. "Just don't have that baby in my truck." The ancient pickup smelled of cigarettes and pine air freshener. Claire climbed in awkwardly, her pregnant belly making it difficult to maneuver. As they pulled away from the gas station, she kept looking back, half expecting to see Ryan's Tesla returning. The road remained empty. "Your husband," Max said after a few minutes of silence. "He's some kind of asshole?" Claire almost laughed at the blunt question. "Apparently he is." "Rich guy?" Max nodded toward her diamond ring. "Yes," Claire admitted. "Very. Figures," Max muttered. 10 minutes into the drive, Claire felt a sudden sharp cramp. She gasped, clutching her stomach. "Whoa, you okay?" Max glanced over nervously, slowing the truck. "Just a contraction," Claire said through gritted teeth. "Braxton Hicks. False labor. I've been having them for weeks." "You sure?" "Because I don't deliver babies. That's not in my skill set." The pain subsided, leaving Claire breathless but relieved. "I'm sure. The baby's not due for another month." Max didn't look convinced but continued driving. "Motel's just ahead." The Pinewood Motel appeared in the headlights, a single-story building with maybe 12 rooms total. The vacancy sign flickered, and only 2 other cars sat in the parking lot. "Welcome to luxury accommodations," Max said dryly as he parked. Inside the small office, a sleepy-looking woman perked up at potential customers. Her smile faded slightly at Claire's disheveled appearance. "We need a room," Max said, "just for tonight." "That'll be $68, the woman replied, pushing a registration card across the counter. Claire looked to Max, mortification burning her cheeks. I don't have any money. My cards are with your jerk husband," Max finished for her. He pulled out his wallet and counted out bills, grimacing at the dwindling supply. "This room better have HBO," he muttered to the clerk, who merely raised an eyebrow in response. The motel room was basic: a queen bed with a faded floral comforter, a television that predated streaming services, and a bathroom with fluorescent lighting that made Claire look even more exhausted than she felt. Max had reluctantly paid for the room, adding his phone number to a motel notepad before leaving. "Call if you need anything," he had said gruffly. "Not that I'm offering to be your chauffeur or anything, but emergencies." Now alone, Claire sat on the edge of the bed, her hand resting on her belly, as the baby moved restlessly inside her. The reality of her situation descended like a physical weight on her shoulders. Her husband had abandoned her, pregnant and vulnerable, at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. There was no misunderstanding, no confusion about what had happened. Ryan had deliberately driven away, leaving her with nothing. Claire reached for the phone on the nightstand and dialed her home number again. The answering machine picked up immediately, suggesting Ryan had unplugged the base unit. This time, she didn't leave a message. She tried to recall her mother-in-law's number, but the digits jumbled in her stressed mind. She'd never been particularly close to Ryan's family anyway. They had always treated her with a thinly veiled skepticism, as though they suspected she had married Ryan for his money rather than love. The irony wasn't lost on her now. Claire kicked off her painful heels and curled onto the bed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. She had met Ryan 5 years ago at a charity gala where she'd been working as an event coordinator. He had pursued her relentlessly, sending flowers to her office, arranging elaborate dates, whisking her away for weekend trips in private jets. Within 6 months, she had moved into his mansion. Within a year, they were married. She had quit her job at his suggestion. "My wife doesn't need to work," he had said, as though offering her a gift, and it had seemed like one at the time. Freedom from 9-to-5 constraints, unlimited shopping budgets, staff to handle household chores. Only now did she realize how systematically he had isolated her, making her dependent on him for everything from social connections to basic necessities. Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks, dropping onto the rough pillowcase. What would she do tomorrow with no money, no ID, no phone? How would she get home? Did she even have a home anymore? She forced herself to take deep breaths, knowing stress wasn't good for the baby. The baby. Her hand cupped her belly protectively. Whatever Ryan had done, whatever his reasons, she needed to stay focused on keeping herself and their child safe. The sonogram picture and prenatal vitamins were still in her coat pocket, the sum total of her possessions. She pulled out the small black and white image, studying the profile of her baby. This child was real and coming soon, regardless of her circumstances. Morning arrived with harsh sunlight through thin curtains. Claire had slept fitfully, plagued by uncomfortable contractions that never established a pattern. Her mouth was dry, her stomach empty. She couldn't remember when she'd last eaten. Sometime at the business dinner, picking at salmon while smiling at Ryan's associates. The motel offered no complimentary breakfast. Claire washed her face in the bathroom sink and tried to make herself presentable. Though her evening dress looked ridiculous in daylight, she needed to check out by 11, yet had nowhere to go and no means to get there. With trembling fingers, she tried her credit card company first. After navigating an automated system, she finally reached a customer service representative. "I need to report my card stolen," Claire explained, though it wasn't technically true. "I'd be happy to help you with that, ma'am. Can I have your card number?" Claire closed her eyes. I don't have the card. That's why I'm calling. I understand. For security purposes, I'll need some information. What's the billing address? Claire provided their home address, only to be told there was a security flag on the account. I'm showing that all cards on this account were reported lost yesterday evening and have been frozen, the representative explained. Claire's stomach dropped. By whom? The primary account holder, Mr. Ryan Mitchell. Of course. Ryan had moved quickly to cut off her access to funds. He had planned this abandonment, prepared for it. Is there anything else I can help you with today? The representative asked brightly. Claire hung up without answering. She tried the bank next with similar results. Their joint checking account had been emptied at 9:47 p.m. the previous night, exactly when Ryan would have been driving away from the gas station. A new low balance notification had been sent to her email, which she couldn't access without her phone. By 10 o'clock, Claire had exhausted all options. She had no access to money, no way to contact friends who might help, and checkout time approaching. Her stomach growled painfully, reminding her she was eating for two. With no alternatives left, Claire picked up the phone and dialed the number Max had left. It rang 4 times before his groggy voice answered. Yeah? It's Claire, from last night, the pregnant woman from the gas station. She swallowed her pride. I need help. There was a long pause, followed by a resigned sigh. You need food, don't you? Yes, she admitted, and I have nowhere to go. My husband froze all our accounts. Another pause. I know someone who might be able to help. My sister runs a place for women in bad situations. Give me an hour. The line went dead before Claire could thank him. She sat on the bed, sonogram picture clutched in her hand, and allowed herself precisely 5 minutes to cry. Then she straightened her shoulders, dried her tears, and began planning how to rebuild her life from absolute zero. Max arrived 15 minutes before checkout, carrying a paper bag containing a breakfast sandwich and orange juice. He barely made eye contact as he handed it to Claire, mumbling something about basic human needs. The simple food was the best thing Claire had tasted in months, free from the pretentious garnishes and tiny portions that characterized the restaurants Ryan preferred. My sister Lisa runs a women's shelter in Pineville, Max explained as Claire finished eating. It's not fancy, but they have beds, food, and people who can help with your situation. Claire nodded, swallowing her last bite. I appreciate this more than I can say. Don't mention it, Max said, clearly uncomfortable with gratitude. Seriously, don't. Let's go before they charge another night. The shelter was housed in a former church community center, its brick exterior weathered but well-maintained. A small, discreet sign read, New Beginnings Women's Resource Center. Inside, the space was divided into a common area with mismatched furniture, a kitchen, offices, and dormitory-style bedrooms visible through an open doorway. Lisa turned out to be Max's opposite in every way. Warm, talkative, and instantly welcoming. Where Max was lanky and awkward, Lisa was solid and confident, with the same dark eyes but used for making connections rather than avoiding them. Max told me what happened, Hey, she said, guiding Claire to a comfortable chair. I've seen it all here, honey, but abandoning a pregnant woman at a gas station? That's a new low. Claire explained her situation in more detail, the frozen accounts, the lack of ID, the baby due in just over a month. Lisa listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. First things first, Lisa said when Claire finished. We need to get you some clothes that don't scream, business dinner gone wrong. Then medical attention. When was your last prenatal checkup? Last week. Everything was normal. Good. We have a clinic that works with us. They'll see you regardless of insurance status. Lisa studied Claire's face. Have you considered calling the police? What your husband did could qualify as criminal abandonment. Claire hesitated. I just want to figure out what to do next. I'm not sure involving the police will help. Fair enough, your call. But if you change your mind, we can help with that too. Over the next few days, Claire settled into life at the shelter. She traded her designer dress for donated maternity clothes and began helping in the communal kitchen to earn her keep. The other women at the shelter had their own stories of betrayal and hardship. Some had fled abusive relationships with nothing but their children and the clothes on their backs. Compared to some, Claire realized her own situation, while traumatic, offered certain advantages. She was educated, had work experience, and despite Ryan's betrayal, had skills and knowledge that could help her rebuild. 1 week after her abandonment, a courier delivered divorce papers to the shelter. How Ryan had found her, Claire couldn't guess, but the message was clear. He wanted a clean break. The proposed settlement offered $10,000, a pittance compared to their marital assets, in exchange for her signature within 3 days. No alimony, minimal child support, and a clause preventing her from publicly discussing their marriage or separation. Claire called the only number included with the papers, reaching Ryan's longtime attorney. This offer is insulting, she said calmly. It's quite generous given the circumstances, the lawyer replied smoothly. Mr. Mitchell is willing to provide this settlement despite having prenuptial protections. What prenuptial agreement? I never signed anything like that. There was a pause on the line. The agreement you signed before your wedding. Page 3, paragraph 7 specifically addresses separation terms. Claire felt cold. Show me my signature on this alleged agreement. The attorney coughed uncomfortably. I'll have copies sent over. In the meantime, I suggest you consider the current offer carefully. It expires in 3 days. After hanging up, Claire sat in the shelter's small office, hands shaking. She had never signed a prenuptial agreement. Ryan had mentioned it once, early in their engagement, but had later assured her they didn't need such unromantic formalities. If he had forged her signature on legal documents, what else had he falsified? Lisa found her staring at the divorce papers an hour later. Bad news? Potentially good news, actually, Claire said slowly. I think my husband made a serious legal mistake. That evening, Claire joined a sewing circle at the shelter. One of the residents was teaching others to repurpose donated clothes. Claire had dabbled in design before meeting Ryan, making her own outfits for events she coordinated. As she worked on modifying a maternity shirt, muscle memory took over. Soon she had transformed the basic garment into something stylish and comfortable. You've got real talent, observed Mira, a young mother of 2. Where did you learn to sew like that? I used to make costumes for community theater, Claire explained, surprising herself with the memory. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed it. Looking down at her handwork, Claire felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced since before the gas station. Possibility. With needle and thread in hand, she wasn't just a victim of abandonment or a charity case. She was creating something new from discarded materials, much like she would need to do with her own life. Claire woke to a sharp, insistent pain radiating from her lower back. She glanced at the clock. 3:17 a.m., 4 weeks before her due date. Another contraction gripped her, stronger than the Braxton Hicks she'd been experiencing. This felt different, more purposeful. She reached for the small notebook beside her bed where she'd been tracking contractions out of an abundance of caution. The last one had been 20 minutes ago. This wasn't a false alarm. "Lisa," Claire called, trying to keep her voice calm so as not to wake the other women in the shared room. "Lisa, I think it's time." Lisa appeared in the doorway moments later, instantly alert despite the hour. One look at Claire's face told her everything she needed to know. "How far apart are the contractions?" "About 20 minutes, but getting stronger." Lisa nodded. "Let's get you to the hospital. I'll call Max to drive us." Max arrived in record time, his usual reticence replaced by nervous energy. He helped Claire into the truck while mumbling about clean towels and boiling water. "This isn't a Western movie," Lisa chided her brother. "Just drive carefully." The hospital was thankfully quiet at that hour. Claire was admitted quickly, her lack of insurance causing only minimal administrative delays thanks to Lisa's skilled advocacy. By sunrise, Claire's contractions were 5 minutes apart. "The baby's coming a bit early, but everything looks good," the doctor assured her after an examination. "First pregnancies often take their time, so settle in." Claire nodded, gripping the bed rail, as another contraction built. She had imagined this moment differently, with Ryan holding her hand, perhaps even filming the birth as he'd once suggested. Instead, Lisa sat beside her, offering quiet encouragement, while Max paced the waiting room, oddly invested in the well-being of a woman he'd met only weeks ago at a gas station. At 11:43 a.m., after 14 hours of labor, Claire gave birth to a healthy 6-pound, 2-ounce baby girl with a full head of dark hair. The moment the nurse placed the tiny bundle on Claire's chest, the world contracted to just the two of them. The abandonment, the shelter, the uncertainties ahead, all faded temporarily into the background. "Hello, little one," Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's just you and me now, but we're going to be okay." Lisa stepped out to give them privacy, returning later with a small gift bag containing a hand-knitted baby hat and booties made by the women at the shelter. "She's beautiful," Lisa said, gently touching the baby's miniature fingers. "Have you thought of a name?" Claire studied her daughter's face. "Lily," she decided. "It means rebirth." The bubble of joy surrounding Claire and Lily burst the following day, when a hospital administrator appeared with a grave expression. "Ms. Mitchell, we need to discuss your financial situation. The charges for delivery and postnatal care are substantial and without insurance." Claire nodded, the familiar anxiety returning. "How much?" The total made her dizzy, more money than she could hope to earn in a year, especially as a single mother with no employment. "I can arrange a payment plan," Claire said, trying to sound confident. The administrator looked skeptical. "We typically require a good faith payment of at least 20% before discharge." "She needs more time," Lisa interjected firmly. "I understand, but hospital policy requires—" A nurse interrupted, looking flustered. "Excuse me, but there's a situation at the front desk. Someone leaked Ms. Mitchell's story to social media. There are reporters asking questions about the abandoned pregnant wife and her baby." Claire felt the blood drain from her face. "What?" The nurse handed her a tablet showing a social media post that had gone viral overnight. Someone, likely a hospital employee, had shared the basics of Claire's story, though thankfully without her name or photo. The post described how a wealthy businessman had abandoned his 8 months pregnant wife at a gas station, emptied their accounts, and left her destitute. It had been shared thousands of times, with commenters expressing outrage and demanding justice. "This is a privacy violation," the administrator sputtered. "I didn't authorize this," Claire said, stunned. Before anyone could respond, Claire's phone rang. Lisa had helped her get a basic prepaid model using shelter resources. The number was unfamiliar. "Is this Claire Mitchell?" a woman's voice asked when she answered. "This is Jennifer Baxter from the Morning Chronicle. We're running a story on your situation and would love your comment." Claire ended the call immediately, her heart racing. How had they found her? More importantly, how would Ryan react when the story broke? His carefully cultivated business image depended on being seen as trustworthy and ethical. "I need to be discharged," Claire told the administrator. "Today, I can't have reporters finding my baby." "But your bill, I'll figure it out," Claire insisted. "But I need to protect my daughter." Within hours, social media was ablaze with the story. The hospital's phones rang constantly with reporters seeking confirmation. More surprisingly, the hospital began receiving calls from people wanting to help pay Claire's medical bills. By evening, an anonymous donor had covered the full amount. "It seems your situation struck a nerve," the administrator said, handing Claire the discharge papers. "Your bill has been settled." As Max drove Claire and Lily back to the shelter that evening, Claire's phone continually buzzed with messages from unknown numbers. News outlets, lawyers offering to represent her, and even a book agent seeking rights to her story. The world had taken notice of her abandonment, but Claire wasn't sure if the attention would help or hurt her cause. "What are you going to do?" Max asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Claire looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her carrier. "Keep moving forward," she said quietly. "One day at a time." Claire settled into a routine at the shelter, caring for Lily while continuing to help with chores. The viral nature of her story had thankfully faded slightly, though occasional reporters still tried to track her down. She declined all interviews, focusing instead on building a foundation for her new life. 3 weeks after Lily's birth, Claire was in the shelter's common room, repurposing donated baby clothes for Lily, who had already outgrown her newborn outfits. She had developed a knack for transforming plain onesies into adorable garments with just a few strategic stitches and embellishments. Mira, the young mother who had first noticed Claire's sewing skills, paused to admire a tiny dress Claire had created from a basic white onesie and scraps of colorful fabric. "That's seriously cute," Mira said. "You could sell those." Claire smiled, adjusting a small bow. "Maybe someday." "No, really. My sister works at a children's boutique downtown. They'd go crazy for handmade stuff like this." Before Claire could respond, Lisa entered with a visitor, a well-dressed woman in her 40s with a professional camera. "Claire, this is Diane Jenkins. She's a volunteer who photographs our success stories for our annual fundraiser. Would you mind if she took some pictures of the common areas? You don't have to be in them if you're uncomfortable." Claire nodded her consent, returning to her sewing. As Diane moved around the room capturing images of the shelter's daily life, she noticed Claire's handmade baby clothes. "Did you make those?" Diane asked, kneeling to examine a small outfit. "Yes, just repurposing some donations," Claire explained. "May I?" Diane asked, gesturing to her camera. When Claire nodded, she took several photos of the garments, focusing on the intricate details. 3 days later, Lisa burst into the kitchen where Claire was helping prepare lunch. "You need to see this," she said, holding up her phone. The screen showed Diane's photo of one of Claire's baby outfits. It had been posted to a popular parenting blog with the caption, "Handmade by a domestic violence survivor at New Beginnings Shelter. Beauty from ashes." The post had thousands of likes and hundreds of comments asking where to purchase similar items. Claire stared at the screen. She didn't ask permission to post that. I know, and I've already spoken with her. She feels terrible and will take it down immediately if you want. But Claire, people are asking where they can buy these. This could be an opportunity. Claire's mind raced. She had designed event materials in her previous career, but had never considered fashion entrepreneurship. Yet her creations were clearly resonating with people. What would I even need to start something like this? She wondered aloud. The next day, Lisa helped Claire set up a simple online store under the name Resilience Baby Boutique. They photographed her existing creations and listed them with modest prices. Claire worked late into the night sewing additional inventory, using donated fabrics and repurposed clothes. The first order came within hours, followed by a steady stream throughout the day. By the end of the week, Claire had sold every item and had a wait list for custom orders. The income wasn't substantial, but it represented something priceless: financial independence. As Claire's small business grew, so did media interest in her story. One morning, a bouquet arrived at the shelter with a business card from Vanessa Perez, executive producer at NCN Morning News. "We would love to feature your journey and your business on our show," the handwritten note read. "Your story of resilience is inspiring millions." Claire hesitated. She had avoided publicity, concerned about how Ryan might retaliate. But now, with a growing business and increasing confidence, perhaps it was time to reclaim her narrative. That evening, Claire received an unexpected call from Ryan's attorney. "Mrs. Mitchell, my client is concerned about the public attention your situation is receiving." "My situation?" Claire echoed, keeping her voice level. "You mean being abandoned while pregnant at a gas station?" The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mr. Mitchell proposes an amended settlement. He's willing to offer $50,000 and increased child support in exchange for a confidentiality agreement regarding the circumstances of your separation." The offer was still insultingly low compared to what she was entitled to, but the dramatic increase revealed something important. Ryan was feeling the pressure. "Thank you for the offer," Claire said calmly. "Please tell Mr. Mitchell I'll consider it after consulting with my attorney." "You have legal representation?" The surprise in his voice was evident. "I do now," Claire replied, though it wasn't yet true. She ended the call and immediately contacted a lawyer Lisa had recommended weeks earlier. The following day, Claire agreed to the interview with Vanessa Perez, with specific conditions: no mention of Ryan by name, focus on her business rather than the abandonment, and no filming of Lily's face. As Claire prepared for the interview, selecting one of her handmade outfits as a demonstration piece, she received a text from Max. "Your ex's company stock dropped 3% today after rumors about his personal conduct. Thought you'd want to know." Claire didn't reply, but a small smile crossed her face. She hadn't sought revenge, but she wouldn't mourn the consequences of Ryan's own actions catching up to him. For now, her focus remained on building something meaningful from the broken pieces of her old life, one stitch at a time. The interview aired the following week, presenting Claire as an entrepreneur who had transformed personal hardship into opportunity. She spoke eloquently about resilience and its mission of creating beautiful things from discarded materials. Without naming Ryan or providing specific details of the abandonment, the story of her journey from gas station to business owner captured viewers' imaginations. The morning after the interview aired, Claire's online store crashed from the volume of orders. Her inbox overflowed with messages from customers, potential business partners, and more media requests. Lisa helped her set up a proper website with enhanced capacity. and several women from the shelter volunteered to assist with fulfillment. "We need to talk about scaling," Lisa said as they packaged orders in the shelter's common room. "You can't keep up with this demand by yourself, especially while caring for Lily." Claire nodded, watching as Mira and 2 other residents carefully folded tiny outfits into tissue paper. "I know. I'm thinking of approaching it differently. What if I taught other women here to sew these designs? We could create jobs for residents while meeting demand." Lisa's eyes lit up. "A social enterprise? That's brilliant." Within weeks, Resilience had transformed from a one-woman operation into a small workshop employing 5 shelter residents. Claire developed a training program and standardized designs while maintaining quality control. The business model gained additional media attention, positioning Resilience as not just a baby clothing brand, but a mission-driven company, helping women rebuild their lives. A small boutique in the city offered Claire shelf space, marking her first brick-and-mortar retail presence. On the day of her in-store debut, Claire dressed Lily in a special outfit she'd created for the occasion and asked Max to drive them to the store. "You've come a long way from that gas station," Max commented as they pulled up to the upscale children's boutique. Claire smiled, looking at the window display featuring her creations. "We both have." Inside, the store owner introduced Claire to several regular customers who had come specifically to meet the designer behind Resilience. As Claire answered questions about her inspiration and techniques, she noticed a familiar figure watching from across the room. Vanessa Perez, the producer from her television interview, approached with a warm smile. "Your designs are even more beautiful in person. May I speak with you privately for a moment?" In a quiet corner of the store, Vanessa revealed the true purpose of her visit. "I've been following your story with particular interest, Claire. There's something you should know." Claire tensed, instinctively reaching for Lily in her carrier. "I'm not just a producer," Vanessa continued. "I'm also the Vanessa from your husband's text messages." Claire felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. This elegant, accomplished woman was Ryan's mistress? "Before you react, please hear me out," Vanessa said quickly. "Ryan and I weren't having an affair. We were working on a business deal, one he wanted to keep secret from you because it involved selling company assets without board approval. When I realized he was misleading both his wife and his company, I backed out. He was furious." Claire studied Vanessa's face for signs of deception but found only sincerity. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because what Ryan did to you was unconscionable, and I suspect it's just the tip of the iceberg. The SEC has been investigating his company for months. As a journalist, I've been tracking the story, but as someone indirectly involved in your abandonment, I felt you deserved to know personally." Claire absorbed this information, connecting dots she hadn't previously seen. The business dinner that night, the long day he claimed to have had. He was under investigation even then. Vanessa nodded, "and likely using joint assets to cover his tracks. You might want to have your lawyer look into that." "Nein." After Vanessa left, Claire called her attorney from the store's back office, sharing the new information about possible financial misconduct. The lawyer was immediately interested. If he was moving marital assets to shield them from investigation, that strengthens your position significantly. I'll file for financial discovery immediately. The store appearance was a success, with every Resilience item selling out before closing. As Max drove Claire and Lily back to the shelter, her phone rang with a number she immediately recognized. "Claire, it's Ryan." The sound of his voice after all these months sent a chill through her. "What do you want?" We need to talk, in person, about us." Claire almost laughed. "There is no us." "I made a mistake," Ryan said, his voice uncharacteristically humble. "A terrible mistake. I was under enormous pressure with the business. Some investments went bad, the board was asking questions, and I just snapped. I never meant to actually leave you there." "But you did," Claire replied evenly. "And you froze the accounts, and you sent divorce papers. Those aren't actions taken in a momentary lapse of judgment. I want to make it right. I miss you. I haven't even seen my daughter." "Our daughter," Claire corrected. "And whose fault is that? Please just meet with me. Tomorrow, I can come to you." Claire considered refusing, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was curiosity about what had reduced the arrogant man who abandoned her to this pleading voice. Or perhaps it was the opportunity to face him on her terms, from a position of growing strength rather than vulnerability. "Fine. Tomorrow at noon. There's a cafe called Margie's 2 blocks from the shelter. 15 minutes. That's all you get." After ending the call, Claire sat in silence as they drove through the evening streets. Max glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Everything okay?" Claire looked down at Lily, sleeping peacefully in her carrier, unaware of the storm gathering around her. "Ryan wants to meet tomorrow." Max's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Do you want me to come with you?" The offer touched Claire deeply. "No, but thank you. This is something I need to do alone." That night, as Claire prepared for bed in her small shelter room, she received an email from her attorney. The subject line read, "Urgent Financial Discovery Findings." Attached were documents showing Ryan had transferred millions in marital assets to offshore accounts just days before abandoning her. Claire closed her laptop, a strange calm settling over her. Tomorrow's meeting had just taken on an entirely new dimension. Claire arrived at Margie's cafe 15 minutes early, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance. She wore a simple dress of her own design, professional but approachable, and carried a folder containing the financial documents her lawyer had sent. Lily was with Lisa back at the shelter, giving Claire the freedom to focus entirely on the confrontation ahead. Ryan entered exactly at noon, his expensive suit and perfect haircut at odds with the casual cafe atmosphere. Several patrons glanced up, recognizing him from business magazines or local news. His confident stride faltered slightly when he spotted Claire, as though he'd expected the broken woman he'd abandoned, not this composed professional waiting calmly with a folder and coffee. "Claire," he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. She turned her face, offering her hand instead. "Ryan." He sat across from her, his practiced smile not quite reaching his eyes. "You look well. Motherhood suits you." "Thank you for meeting me," Ryan continued when Claire remained silent. "I know I have a lot to explain, to apologize for." "Do you?" Claire asked evenly. Ryan launched into a carefully rehearsed speech about pressure, temporary insanity, and profound regret. He described sleepless nights thinking about his actions, about missing the birth of his child, about throwing away their marriage. Claire listened without interruption, noting how his explanation carefully avoided any mention of financial impropriety or SEC investigations. "I want us to try again," Ryan concluded, reaching for her hand across the table. "I want to meet my daughter, be a family. I was wrong, Claire, terribly wrong." Claire withdrew her hand from his reach. "You abandoned me, 8 months pregnant, at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. You drove away knowing I had no phone, no money, no means to get help. I know, and I will spend the rest of my life making that up to you if you'll let me. Then you froze our accounts, emptied our checking, and sent insulting divorce papers. Claire continued, as if he hadn't spoken. You forced me to rely on the kindness of strangers while carrying your child. Ryan's expression tightened slightly. I wasn't thinking clearly. The business was in trouble. Yes, let's talk about the business. Claire opened her folder and slid a document across the table. These are transfers you made to offshore accounts 3 days before abandoning me. Marital assets, Ryan, our money. The color drained from Ryan's face. Where did you get this? My lawyer is very thorough. The SEC will be interested in these transactions, especially in light of their ongoing investigation. Ryan's facade cracked. You don't understand what's at stake. I understand perfectly. Your company is under investigation. Your reputation is in tatters, and you need me to come back and play the forgiving wife to rehabilitate your image. Claire's voice remained steady. What I don't understand is why you thought I would agree. Because despite everything, we had something good once. Ryan's tone shifted from contrition to persuasion, the skilled negotiator emerging. Think about Lily. She deserves to grow up with her father in comfort and security. The shelter is no place to raise a child. Don't you dare, Claire said, her first flash of real anger breaking through. Don't use our daughter to manipulate me. Lily is thriving, surrounded by people who genuinely care about her well-being. And what kind of future can you provide for her? Handmade baby clothes is a cute hobby, but it's not a sustainable business model. Claire smiled. Actually, I'm meeting with investors next week. We're expanding into a proper production facility. 30% of profits will go to supporting women's shelters, with priority hiring for survivors of domestic violence and abandonment. Ryan scoffed. So you're building a charity, not a business. I'm building something meaningful, something that helps people rather than exploits them. Claire closed her folder. Your 15 minutes are up. Wait, Ryan said, as she stood to leave. What do you want? Money. A house. Name it, and it's yours. Claire looked down at the man she had once loved, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. The charm that had once swept her off her feet now seemed hollow, a tool wielded for advantage rather than genuine connection. I want nothing from you except fair division of our marital assets and appropriate child support. My lawyer will be in touch with yours. She turned to go, then paused. And Ryan, the next time you see our daughter will be through court-approved visitation after paternity is established and a proper custody agreement is in place. Ryan's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. I built you up once. I can tear you down just as easily. No, that's where you're wrong, Claire replied calmly. I built myself up after you tore me down. There's a difference. She walked out of the cafe with her head high, leaving Ryan staring after her. Outside, she took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling lighter than she had in months. The confrontation she had feared for so long was over, and she had emerged, not just unscathed, but stronger. Back at the shelter, Claire found Lisa playing with Lily in the common room. The baby's face lit up at the sight of her mother, tiny arms reaching upward. Claire scooped her up, breathing in the sweet baby's scent. How did it go? Lisa asked. It went exactly as it needed to, Claire replied. And now we move forward. That evening, Claire received a call from her lawyer. Ryan's business partner, Jeffrey Collins, wanted to meet with her privately. He says it's about a settlement offer, the lawyer explained, but he wants to discuss it without Ryan's knowledge. I'd advise caution, but it might be worth hearing what he has to say. Claire agreed to the meeting, curious what Ryan's partner could offer that Ryan himself could not. 2 days later, she sat across from Jeffrey Collins in her lawyer's office, listening to a proposition that would change everything. Ryan has become a liability, Collins explained bluntly. Investors are pulling out, clients are canceling contracts, and the SEC investigation is gaining momentum. Your story, while never directly connected to our company in the media, has created an image problem we can't overcome with him at the helm. Collins slid a document across the table. This is a substantial settlement offer, considerably more generous than what Ryan proposed. In exchange, we ask for your discretion regarding company matters. Claire's lawyer examined the figures. This is significant, but what's not being said here? Collins hesitated. The board is preparing to remove Ryan as CEO. Your acceptance of this settlement before that happens would be beneficial for all parties. Claire understood the implication. They wanted her silenced before they pushed Ryan out, preventing any potential alliance between estranged spouses against the company. I'll consider it, Claire said, taking the document. But I have conditions of my own. Claire studied the settlement offer in her temporary office at the shelter, where a supply closet had been converted to accommodate her growing business. The figures were substantial, enough to secure Lily's future and properly launch Resilience beyond its current, small-scale operation. But something about the offer troubled her, not in what it contained, but in what it represented. Another attempt to buy her silence. Another man in a suit thinking he could control her narrative. Her laptop pinged with an email from Vanessa Perez. They had kept in sporadic contact since Vanessa's revelation about her connection to Ryan. The message contained a single link to a financial news site with the subject line, "Thought you should see this first." The article detailed allegations from a whistleblower inside Ryan's company, claiming systematic financial misconduct going back years. The SEC investigation had expanded, and criminal charges were being considered. Ryan's name appeared repeatedly, but so did Jeffrey Collins's. They had been partners in deception as well as business. Claire forwarded the article to her lawyer with a brief note. "I'm declining Collins's offer. Prepare for court." The next morning, news broke that Ryan had been removed as CEO of his company by unanimous board vote. By afternoon, his replacement had been announced, Jeffrey Collins. The company's stock rallied briefly on the news before plummeting again when financial outlets connected Collins to the same alleged misconduct. Claire's phone rang as she was finishing a prototype for Resilience's new toddler line. The number was blocked, but she answered anyway. "You bitch," Ryan's voice slurred through the speaker. "You've ruined everything." Claire remained calm. "You did that yourself, Ryan. Collins offered you millions to keep quiet, and you still went to the SI UNTAC. "I didn't go to the SEC, Claire replied truthfully. "But I'm not surprised someone did. You've hurt a lot of people." "I built that company from nothing," Ryan continued, his voice rising. "It was mine." "Just like I was yours?" Claire asked softly. "Something to be used and discarded when inconvenient?" The line went silent for a moment. When Ryan spoke again, his tone had changed, desperate, pleading. "Claire, you have to help me. They're coming after everything, the house, the cars, even my personal accounts." "I'm sorry that's happening to you," Claire said, meaning it despite everything. "But I can't help you." "They'll take Lily's inheritance," Ryan countered. "Everything that should have been hers. Lily doesn't need your money. She needs integrity, compassion, and the knowledge that her worth isn't determined by her bank account. I'll make sure she has all those things." "You think your little baby clothes hobby will support her? You're delusional." Claire glanced around at the sketches for her upcoming collection. the order forms from 3 major retailers and the business plan for a proper manufacturing facility that would employ women from shelters across the state. Goodbye, Ryan. I wish you well, truly, but we don't need you anymore. She ended the call and blocked his number, a simple action that felt profoundly liberating. 2 days later, Claire sat in a conference room at one of the city's most prestigious law firms. Across from her were not only her own lawyer, but representatives from the SEC, the district attorney's office, and Ryan's company's legal team. Ms. Mitchell, began the lead SEC investigator, we appreciate your cooperation. Your testimony regarding the marital assets Mr. Mitchell concealed will be invaluable to our case. Claire nodded. I'll tell you everything I know, but I want to be clear about something. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because actions should have consequences and because other people deserve protection from this kind of behavior. The session lasted hours, Claire methodically walking them through the financial documents she had access to during her marriage, identifying patterns she hadn't recognized as significant at the time. Ryan had never worried about hiding his financial maneuvers from her, assuming she wouldn't understand or care about the details. There's one more thing, Claire said as the meeting concluded. Regardless of the outcome of these proceedings, I want to ensure that the innocent employees of the company don't suffer for the actions of its leadership. Many of them have families, responsibilities. The company's lawyer looked surprised. That's unusually considerate, given your history with the organization. I know what it's like to be collateral damage in someone else's story, Claire replied simply. I don't wish that on anyone. As Claire left the building, a news crew waited outside. She had expected this, had dressed professionally in one of her own designs, specifically for the cameras she knew would be present. Ms. Mitchell called a reporter. Do you have a statement about your ex-husband's removal as CEO and the ongoing SEC investigation? Claire stopped, facing the cameras directly. My focus remains on building a future for my daughter and growing a business that empowers women who have faced adversity. Beyond that, I trust our justice system to address any wrongdoing appropriately. Is it true your baby clothes company is now valued higher than your ex-husband's remaining assets? Another reporter shouted. Claire smiled slightly. I couldn't comment on that, but I will say that true value isn't just measured in dollars. It's measured in impact, in integrity, and in the strength to rebuild after devastation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a daughter waiting for me. Back at the shelter, Claire found Max awkwardly holding Lily, who was fussing in his inexperienced arms. His face flooded with relief when he saw Claire. She started crying and I didn't know what to do, he admitted, carefully transferring the baby to her mother. Claire settled Lily against her shoulder, the child immediately calming at her familiar scent. You did fine. She just knows her Uncle Max isn't a baby person. Max rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed by the familial designation. How'd it go with the suits? It went, Claire sighed. Ryan's in serious trouble. Legal, financial, all of it. Good, Max said firmly. After what he did to you. Claire looked down at Lily, now contentedly grasping at her mother's necklace. You know what's strange? I actually feel sorry for him. He had everything and valued none of it. Now he's losing it all and finally sees what mattered. You're a better person than me, Max muttered. Claire shook her head. Not better, just different. And speaking of different, I need your help with something. 1 year later, Claire parked her modest SUV outside the rural gas station where her life had changed forever. Lily, now a walking, babbling toddler, watched the world with curious eyes from her car seat. The gas station looked exactly the same, a lone outpost on the highway, though the sign now read Max's rather than the corporate logo it had displayed that fateful night. Claire unbuckled Lily and settled her on her hip before walking toward the entrance. The bell jingled as they entered, and Max looked up from behind the counter. "Right on time," he said, coming around to greet them. He had purchased the station 6 months earlier with a loan Claire had helped him secure, transforming it from a soulless corporate franchise to a warm, community-focused business. "Would I be late to my own celebration?" Claire asked, smiling as Max awkwardly patted Lily's head in his version of affection. They walked to Max's apartment behind the station, where Lisa was arranging food on a table decorated with balloons and a banner reading, "Congratulations." Several women from the shelter, including Mira, who now managed Resilience's production team, were already there. "There she is," Lisa announced, embracing Claire. "The woman of the hour." Claire set Lily down to play with the toys arranged in the corner, smoothing her simple but elegant dress. "Hardly. This is all of our achievement, not just mine." Today marked 1 year since Claire had testified in the case against Ryan. His trial had concluded 3 months ago with a guilty verdict on multiple counts of securities fraud and financial misconduct. He was currently serving a 5-year sentence at a minimum security prison, his empire dismantled, his reputation destroyed. But today's celebration wasn't about Ryan's downfall. It was about what Claire and her extended family had built from the wreckage of that abandonment. "I have news," Lisa announced, once everyone had gathered with drinks in hand. The grant came through. "We can add 10 more beds to the shelter and expand the child care program." Cheers erupted. A significant portion of Resilience's profits went directly to supporting the shelter that had saved Claire, creating a virtuous cycle of women helping women. "And," Lisa continued, "our new transitional housing program has secured its first property, 6 apartments for graduates of the shelter program, with subsidized rent while they establish independence." Claire felt tears prick her eyes. When she had first designed baby clothes at the shelter, she could never have imagined how far that small act of creativity would reach. Resilience now employed 27 women, most of them survivors of domestic violence or other hardships. Their products were carried in boutiques nationwide and featured in parenting magazines as must-have items. "Your turn," Lisa nudged Claire. "Tell them your news." Claire cleared her throat. As of this morning, Resilience's valuation exceeded the peak value of Ryan's former company. She paused as whistles and applause filled the room. "But more importantly, we've helped 38 women transition from crisis to independence this year alone. That's the real measure of success." After the celebration wound down, Claire found herself alone with Max on the small porch behind his apartment. Lily had fallen asleep inside, watched over by Lisa. The evening air was cool but pleasant, carrying the scent of wildflowers from the fields beyond the gas station. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Max said, leaning against the railing. Claire nodded. "Harder to believe everything that's happened since then." "You know," Max said, "when you walked into my station that night, I thought you were just another entitled rich lady with problems." Claire laughed. "And you were just the grumpy gas station attendant who wanted to close up and go home." "Look at us now," Max gestured toward the station. "Business owner and CEO. "We've both come a long way," Claire agreed. "Thank you, by the way, for stopping here today. I know it seems strange to want to visit the place where everything fell apart." "Not strange," Max said. "Full circle." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "I've been thinking," Max said finally, "maybe we could do something regular. You, me, Lily, like dinner or whatever, if you want to." Claire turned to look at him, this unlikely friend who had become something more over the months of rebuilding her life. Not quite romance yet, but possibility, potential, something real and grounded, unlike the whirlwind that had swept her into marriage with Ryan. "I'd like that," she said simply. The next morning, Claire drove back to the city, Lily chattering happily in her car seat. Her phone rang through the car's speakers, her assistant's voice filling the vehicle. "Claire, the major retail chain just confirmed. They want resilience in all their stores nationwide by fall." "That's fantastic," Claire replied. "Set up a team meeting for tomorrow. We'll need to scale up production." "Already on it. Oh, and one more thing. The business magazine called again. They want to feature you on the cover of their Women Entrepreneurs Changing the World issue." Claire smiled. "Tell them yes, but only if they include our social mission, not just the business success." As she drove, Claire caught sight of a familiar exit sign, the same one she had pointed out to Ryan that night when she'd asked him to stop because she felt ill. She had no reason to take that exit now, yet she found herself signaling, pulling off the highway as though guided by instinct. She parked at the viewpoint just beyond the exit ramp, a scenic overlook offering views of the valley below. Unbuckling her seatbelt, she turned to check on Lily, who had fallen asleep clutching her favorite toy. Claire stepped out of the car, the spring breeze lifting her hair as she walked to the guardrail. From this vantage point, she could see for miles the road behind and the path ahead. Symbolism wasn't lost on her. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The business news headline read, "Resilience Baby Boutique Valuation Surpasses Mitchell Tech's Former Peak." Claire put her phone away, not needing external validation for what she already knew. 1 year ago, she had been abandoned with nothing but the clothes on her back and an unborn child in her womb. Today, she stood as a successful entrepreneur, a mother, a philanthropist, and a woman who had discovered her own resilience in the darkest moment of her life. She returned to the car, gently brushing Lily's cheek with her finger. The toddler stirred slightly, smiling in her sleep, secure in the knowledge that she was loved and protected. Claire started the engine, merging back onto the highway, moving forward as she had been doing since that night at the gas station. Not running from the past, but not defined by it either. Building something new, something better, something truly her own, one day at a time.